Hello everyone, and in this video we're going to take a look at how to render hair and fur in Houdini using mantra. So this is the rendering video which is part of the hairy Houdini training. So the file for this won't be available on YouTube. The file will be available directly on Gumroad. So I'm going to take the file and upload it to the hairy Houdini training. So whoever has purchased it, you'll get a download notification that new files have been added and you can download it from there. So I'll do that in a couple of days, like once the video is uploaded, so you can get the file from there directly. Alright, so to start with, we need to do, I'm going to do two files. I'll do one for fur and I'll do one for hair. And what I want to do, or what you need to do before you start rendering, and this is applicable to any of the render engines, is if you're going to do fur, you need to be able to, you need the UVs from your base geometry to transfer over to your fur. And the way to do that is fairly simple. Like if you come to, if I look at my base geometry, which was like the rubber toy, like this has UVs. Like if I press on the information, you'll see that it has UVs. So what we need is to just transfer this to the final hair that we have generated. And the way to do that is if you come to the hair generate, and if you come to the, you have the general tab and you have the attribute and appearance tab. Okay, so you come to the attribute and appearance, and at the bottom you'll find these two areas, says source attribute transfer and guide attribute transfer. And what you want to do is in the source attribute transfer, you type in UV in the vertex attribute. And what that will do is it will transfer the UVs over to the hair at primitive level. Like that's the way the setup is done. If you don't do this and you try to use a texture, it won't show up. So with fur, usually the fur is patterned. Like if you're doing, if you want to do like a zebra or a giraffe or whatever, there'll usually be a pattern. So this is extremely important. If you don't do this, you'll have problems later on. All right, so my setup is fairly simple. I have two area lights, like one at the back and one, slightly off to the side. And I also have an environment light which has an HDR. I'll make the HDR available with the final lesson, with the final file. And I have assigned mantra. The settings are default. I haven't changed anything over there. The only change is I've changed the render engine to physically based, okay, which is the one I usually work with. And I have a material net. And this is my old, this is the original hair file, that the hair shader that I was using. And I've created a new one and already assigned it. So we have a hair shader that has been applied. Okay, so let's just hit a basic render to see what we have. So I'm going to just turn off the fur so we can just look at the basic lighting first of all. Okay, so I'm just going to come to render view and let's just take a look at the basic lighting. Yeah, so this is what you have. Like if I turn off, then that's my basic lighting. Okay, so let me just turn on the fur and we'll do a render of that. Yeah, so there you go. So this is the basic fur that you get. So let's just take a look at all the parameters for the hair shader. Okay, so to start off with, you have four major areas, or actually five. Opacity I don't usually work with, so that's fine. You have the primary color, you have the secondary reflection, and then you have transmission for light to sort of bleed through the hair, which you can see happening at the edges. And you have an option for randomization. Okay, so what we'll do is we'll just start off by turning off the transmission and the secondary. See, so when you turn off the transmission, you can see like the edge doesn't light up as much as it was before. Okay, so we'll just deal with the first one, with the first panel, and then we'll continue. Okay, so the color is set from here. You have a basic color set on the hair length. So if I try to adjust this, let's say we'll make it, let's try blue and like pink. So we should be able to see something. Yeah, so there you go. So by default, you have like hair length already set up for you. If you don't want to use the tip color, yeah, usually you have the option to turn off the tip color, but for some reason I can't. Okay, so you have the basic intensity. Let me just make a snapshot of this. So if you want the overall shader to be slightly brighter. The other thing to also remember is that it is essentially sort of a reflection. Okay, now let me just do one thing. I'm going to make the tip a little bit lighter and get this to a reddish as well. So it looks like a soft toy or something. Okay, so along with the intensity, what you can do is if you start lowering the reflection size, you'll see the shading kind of contract. Okay, so if I get it down to say about 0.1, you'll see the shading change a fair bit. See, so this was before, and then you can see like the shading sort of, contracts overall. Now, along with that, you can also do a shift in the shading, which is kind of like in other hair shaders, you can shift the reflection, that's exactly what you're doing here. Yeah, so if I do a snapshot and let's say if I go to like positive 0.5, okay, and what's happening is you'll see like the shading is essentially shifting towards the base of it. And if we go to like a negative 0.5, I find like the negative value feels a little more realistic. Yeah, so see, this is positive and then negative, and you'll see like it's basically shifting more towards the top. Like positive shifts it more towards the tips and negative shifts it more towards the roots. Okay, so that's your default, and then this is positive and this is negative. But as I said, like I prefer negative a little bit more because you get a lot more detail, over here, on the legs and everything. It looks more realistic. So I'll just keep it around like 0.3. I think 0.3 should be good enough. Yeah, that's better. Okay, now along with this, we can add like a secondary reflection if we want. So we can just enable that. So you can see like you have a secondary reflection. So you can set the intensity of it if you want. So if you want it like really shiny, then you can have it really shiny. And again, you can, like if you want to blur it out a lot, we can blur it out. But then it just looks white, like it doesn't really look very good. So don't modify the size. Okay. Usually you want to go even lesser. Okay, so if you want it like really sharp, see, there you go. Yeah, and then you can again shift it. So I'll go again to like a -4. So it'll sort of like shift a little upwards. See, like you're getting a shift over here. And if I go positive, like let me just do that. And if I go positive, it'll shift more towards the tips. But yeah, as I said, like negative feels a little better look wise. Yeah, like this is negative and that's positive. I think, yeah, the negative values look a little better. Yeah, now one thing which I completely sort of forgot before I was supposed to add that in, I completely forgot, is what you want to do before you, whenever you're rendering hair and fur in Houdini using Mantra especially, you want to come to the render tab at object level, come to geometry and turn on render polygon curves as subdivision. Okay, so it'll not only smoothen out the curves, but it also tends to render a little faster. Okay, now I think we can get a little more detail if I come into the hair and just increase the count. Let me do one thing. I'm going to lower the thickness to around 0.15, and then I'm going to take this up to about 20,000. So we should get, like, if it's thinner and more in density, it'll look a little better. Okay, so let me just do a render and see what we get. It will slow down a little because, I mean, we have more quantity, but there you go. It looks a lot softer. So the trick with hair or fur is to have like a lot of quantity. Yeah, see, this looks a lot better, than, what we had before. Yeah, see, so like this was when we had like less hair, but they were thicker. And then this is when we have like more hair, but they're thinner. So you get much more, it looks better, essentially. So as I said, like the trick with doing realistic hair and fur is to have like a really high amount of fur and really thin. It tends to look more dense and more realistic that way. Okay, let me also do one thing. I'm going to take area light 2 and just let me increase the intensity a little bit. So you get a little more, like an extra shine towards the front of it. And let me increase the backlight as well. So the final thing in this is to set up the transmission. You can also set like the reflection color if you want, but I don't want to change that right now. Okay, we could probably go to like slightly pinkish if you want to do that. So yeah, the reflection color will be like slightly tinted towards the hair color. Okay, and then finally you can add transmission. So let me just do a snapshot of this and we can add transmission. And as I said, like transmission basically has light sort of pass through, so it looks a little more realistic, like light is sort of coming through the whole thing. The values are more or less the same. Like it has an inbuilt option where it says tint with diffuse color. If you turn that off, it'll use the white color, which will look bad. Okay, so usually you want to tint it with the diffuse color. Okay, so we can do intensity. So if you want like more light to bleed through, if you increase the size, you are letting in more light, like it sort of blends in more. Let me just increase the size a lot. It will increase the render time a little bit because it's adding like a little bit of transparency in there. So if I keep, so this is at 0.6 and then this is at like 0.04. So you can see the difference, like this is much more brighter and then this is a lot darker towards the edges especially. Okay, and then finally, let me just keep this a little high. We can again, like we can shift the values. Okay, so if I shift it to positive, yeah, with transmission, I don't like shifting doesn't really look very interesting. Like you should keep the shift to 0. It works best that way. So this is at 0.5 and then this is at negative 0.4. So this is 0 and then this is 0.5. So yeah, I think 0 is actually the best one to work with. Negative isn't bad, like it pushes it more towards the edge if you want. Positive just fades it out. Anyway, so this is essentially the overall setup for the hair. So along with that, we can add, let me just turn off, transmission temporarily. It'll go a little faster. We can also randomize, so if you want, you can like randomize the color. Let's increase the value. So by default, it has a range. It has like a positive, negative range. So we'll do like -2 and +2 and see, there you go. So like what you had before, or let's go here. Yeah, so this is like the hair that we had before and this is what we have now. So you can see the difference. So you can randomize everything. You can randomize the color, you can randomize saturation, you can even randomize like specular intensity, which should show up here a little bit. Yeah, you get a little bit of variation in the hair. So you can see like a fair bit of color change happening. Okay, now if you're going to take a texture, then you should, if you want the texture to be seen properly, if you want the texture to be seen without any color variation or any kind of modification, then make sure that the root color is kept to white. Okay, so if I'll have to keep this to white in order to take a texture. Yeah, and then you can just click use map, and I have this flower map that I have available, so I can just directly use that. And the nice thing is it actually even shows up in the viewport. Like when you take a map, like if I turn this off, it actually even shows up in the viewport. The color randomization even affects the texture that you have taken, which is nice because you get a little bit of variation in the whole thing. And so along with this, if I was to tint this, like using whatever color, then you'll see like it actually tints using that particular color. Yeah, and we can then finally let's just turn on, transmission. So it's a pretty decent shader, so this is how you can render like fur in Houdini. And now I'll try and set up a basic hair file. So let me just stop this and I'll save it. And let me open up one of the hairstyles. Like because we built hairstyles, we might as well sort of, do it on that. Okay, so let me just look at the basic setup. Okay, so I'm going to add like a couple of area lights. just so that we have, something proper to work with. So I'll add two lights, like one at the back and one towards the front. Okay. Yeah, I also have like an HDR, but I'll just sort of like lower the intensity of that. Okay, so I haven't transferred the UVs on this because I don't need UVs. And I've already set it up for render polygon curves as subdivision. So that is important. And yeah, let's just get started. So I'm going to turn off the hair temporarily. We'll do a render so we see what we have. Okay, so I'll just turn on the hair and I'll build a new hair shader. Like I have an old one which I was testing out, but we'll just build a new one. Yeah, and I'll assign it. And let's just hit a render and see what we're getting. Yeah, so there you go. So this is the basic look that you will get. Okay, so I'll just set it up to what we had done before. So I'm going to create a snapshot of this. I'm going to turn off transmission and secondary reflection. And let's do a region render. So I'll just render out the hair. Alright, so I want to start off with the same thing. So I'm going to make this slightly reddish because I don't like the default color. And what I want to do is what we had set up before. So I'm going to get the reflection size down to about 0.2 or 0.3. And I'm going to set the reflection shift to minus 0.4 and get the intensity slightly higher. Okay, so let's just see if this setup looks nice. Yeah, so that's what we have, as far as base color is concerned. And let's do one thing. Let's turn on okay, I'll do a snapshot. We'll turn on the secondary reflection. I want to get the intensity to 1. And again, just get the shift down to a negative. Yeah, so that's what we get. So this is the default and then with the specular on top. I think what we can do is, let's change the root color and make it slightly yellowish. So it's a little closer to, whatever color the hair is. Yeah, so there you go. So you can see like it looks a lot better if you modify the reflection color closer to whatever the hair color is. Like if it's pure white, it just looks, kind of weird. Okay, and then lastly, we can turn on transmission. Let's keep this to what it is right now. There's a slight bit of, like, if you can see here, it lightens up, a little bit. If we want, we can just jump up the intensity a little bit more. And I'll just let it render through. Yeah, so there is a very slight bit of difference. Like there's a little bit of glow, but if it's adding, like the previous render time was, well, it's not too much of a difference. It's like 1 minute 55 and 54. So it's roughly the same render time. But anyways, this is basically it. So this is as far as, if you want to set up like proper decent looking hair in Houdini using the mantra shader, then this is, how you go about doing it. And then if you want, you can add a little bit of, hue saturation or, whatever. Plus, if you want to do dyed hair, then this is really useful because I can just, let me do a snapshot of this. And let's say I want to have like blue towards the base of it. Okay, let's do green. And you also get like a root to tip blend curve. So let me just sort of like push it like that. So they're like really green, we'll just get like a flat line where it should immediately transition to green. Let's see how that looks. So there you go. So this is how you can set up like dyed hair. Okay. So the transition curve is actually quite useful. So if you just want to specify, like, instead of getting like a smooth blend of color, if you want the color to start after a particular area, then you can set up the curve accordingly. Okay, so I'll do a final render. I'll just adjust the lighting a little bit, do a final render. But that's basically it. So this is how you can set up. Yeah, so this is essentially how you can set up, hair and fur rendering using mantra. Okay, so I'm just going to take both these lights and just increase their values a fair bit. And there you go. So that's the final render. Basically, I just increased the light intensities from the side because it was too dull. So yeah, that makes it look a lot better. And I also increased the pixel samples from 3 to 5. So you can notice like the hair is a lot, smoother now. So that's, if you want to get like smoother or better anti-aliasing on hair, you need to increase the pixel samples. Like increasing the minimum maximum ray doesn't really do too much with curve rendering. So with curve rendering, you directly just increase this. Usually 6x6 is good enough. Okay, like that gives you fairly smooth hair. And yeah, that's essentially it. So this is how you can render hair and fur in Houdini using Mantra. And as I had mentioned, the file will be available on Gumroad in a few days. You should get a download link notification via email. So yeah, so that's basically it.